Nestled in the heart of Idaho, the small town of Eldridge was a place where time seemed to stand still. With its weathered wooden storefronts and streets lined with ancient oak trees, it exuded a quaint charm that masked an unsettling undercurrent. Locals often whispered about the dense forest that bordered the town, a sprawling wilderness known as the Whispering Pines. It was a place where shadows danced between the trees and the wind carried secrets of the past. As summer approached, the forest beckoned adventurers, but few dared to venture too deep, for tales of strange occurrences and eerie sightings had woven themselves into the fabric of the town's folklore. On a bright Saturday morning, the Eldridge Scouts were buzzing with excitement. The air was thick with the scent of pine and the promise of adventure as 10 eager scouts gathered at the town's community center. Their leader, Scoutmaster Jake, stood at the front, his enthusiasm infectious. With a broad smile and a voice that boomed with authority, he rallied the group, reminding them of the importance of teamwork and camaraderie. "This trip is about more than just camping," he declared. "It's about facing the unknown together." Among the scouts was Jamie, a newcomer to the group. With her skeptical nature and a penchant for questioning everything, she often found herself at odds with the others. "Do you really believe in all those ghost stories?" she asked, rolling her eyes as the boys exchanged tales of the forest's haunted past. Despite her doubts, Jamie felt a thrill of anticipation. This was her chance to prove herself and to fit in with the group. Then there was Lucas, the brave yet superstitious scout. He had grown up hearing the legends of the Whispering Pines, and while he loved the thrill of adventure, he also felt a deep respect for the unknown. "You guys can laugh all you want," he said, glancing nervously at the forest's edge. "But I've heard things out there, things that shouldn't be ignored." His friends teased him, but there was a glimmer of seriousness in his eyes that made them think twice. As the scouts loaded their gear into the van, laughter filled the air. They shared snacks, exchanged jokes, and made plans for their campfire stories. The camaraderie was palpable, a bond forged through shared experiences and the thrill of the upcoming adventure. Yet, beneath the surface of their excitement, an unspoken tension lingered, a sense that the forest held secrets waiting to be uncovered. With the sun shining brightly overhead, the scouts set off toward the Whispering Pines, unaware of the chilling events that awaited them. As they drove away from the familiar safety of Eldridge, the towering trees loomed closer, their branches intertwining like skeletal fingers, ready to embrace the unsuspecting group. As the van rumbled along the winding dirt road, the excitement among the scouts grew. The lush greenery of the Whispering Pines enveloped them as they stepped out into the cool, crisp air. Towering evergreens stretched high above, their needles whispering secrets to one another in the gentle breeze. Sunlight filtered through the branches, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor, where wildflowers bloomed in vibrant colors, painting the landscape with splashes of yellow and purple. Scoutmaster Jake led the way, his backpack bouncing against his back as he called out encouragements to the group. "Keep up the pace, everyone. We have a campsite to set up before dark." The scouts followed closely, their laughter echoing through the trees, a stark contrast to the serene silence of the woods. Jamie, still trying to shake off her skepticism, marveled at the beauty around her. "Okay, I'll admit it," she said, glancing at Lucas. "This place is pretty amazing." But as they ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere began to shift. The cheerful chatter faded, replaced by an unsettling stillness that seemed to envelop them. The air grew thick, and the sunlight struggled to penetrate the canopy above. It was as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As they walked, Jamie suddenly felt a small stone bounce off her boot. She turned, expecting to see one of the boys chuckling behind her, but there was no one. "Did anyone else see that?" she asked, her voice slightly shaky. The others shrugged it off, attributing it to a loose rock or an errant squirrel. "It's just the forest playing tricks," Lucas said, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. Moments later, a rustling sound echoed from the bushes to their left. The group paused, exchanging uneasy glances. "Probably just a deer," Jake suggested, but the uncertainty in his tone betrayed his confidence. Jamie felt a shiver run down her spine, her instincts prickling as if the forest itself was alive and watching them. As they continued, the feeling of being observed intensified. Jamie couldn't shake the sensation that eyes were upon them, lurking just beyond the trees. She glanced over her shoulder, but all she saw were the thick trunks and tangled underbrush. "I swear I heard something," she murmured to Lucas, who nodded, his expression serious. "I felt it too. It's like we're not alone out here." The group pressed on, determined to dismiss their growing unease. They stopped for a brief rest, taking sips from their water bottles and sharing snacks. Laughter returned, but it felt strained, as if the forest was listening, waiting for the right moment to intervene. Just then, another stone flew past, landing harmlessly on the ground. This time, it was larger, and the scouts froze, their smiles vanishing. "Okay, that's weird," Jamie said, her heart racing. "Who threw that?" The others exchanged nervous glances, but Jake quickly dismissed it. "It's probably just the wind or some animal. Let's not let our imaginations run wild." But as they resumed their hike, the air felt charged with an unspoken tension, and the shadows deepened around them. With every step they took, the forest seemed to close in, its beauty now tinged with an unsettling aura. The laughter faded into whispers, and the camaraderie that had once felt so strong began to fray at the edges. Little did they know, the true adventure was just beginning, and the whispering pines held secrets far darker than any of them could have imagined. After a few hours of hiking, the scouts decided it was time for a break. They found a small clearing surrounded by towering trees, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a patchwork of light and shadow on the forest floor. The group settled down, stretching their legs and pulling out snacks. As they relaxed, Jamie noticed something was off. "Where's Lucas?" she asked, scanning the area. The others shrugged, but a sense of unease began to creep in. They called out for him, but there was no response. Just then, Jake's voice broke through the tension. "He probably wandered off to explore. Let's not panic. We'll give him a few minutes." But as the minutes ticked by, Jamie's heart raced. "I'll go look for him," she said, standing up. Just as she turned to head into the trees, a commotion erupted behind her. "My backpack! It's gone!" shouted one of the other scouts, a boy named Ethan. The group turned, confusion etched on their faces. They searched frantically, retracing their steps and calling out for Lucas while rummaging through the underbrush. The forest, once a place of beauty, now felt oppressive and foreboding. "It was right here," Ethan exclaimed, his voice rising in frustration. "I had it just a minute ago." After what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon the backpack, but it was in a bizarre location, suspended from a low branch of a nearby tree, swinging gently as if someone had deliberately placed it there. The sight sent a chill down Jamie's spine. "How did it get up there?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The group exchanged uneasy glances, the earlier excitement replaced by a palpable tension. "This is getting weird," Jamie said, her skepticism beginning to waver. "Maybe we should head back." But Jake shook his head, trying to maintain a sense of authority. "We're not turning back now. Let's just stick together and keep moving." As they resumed their hike, the shadows lengthened, and the forest grew darker. The air turned cooler, and an unsettling silence enveloped them. Just as they reached a point where the trees thickened, the first hints of nightfall began to creep in. The once vibrant colors of the forest faded into shades of gray, and the sounds of the day were replaced by the eerie calls of night creatures. Setting up camp became a hurried affair. The scouts worked together, their laughter strained as they tried to shake off the lingering fear. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, they gathered around the crackling campfire, its warm glow offering a small sense of comfort against the encroaching darkness. But the night brought with it an array of strange noises. The crackling of twigs, the rustling of leaves, and the distant hoots of owls filled the air, creating a symphony of unease. Shadows danced just beyond the firelight, flickering in and out of view, and Jamie felt her heart race with every sound. "Did you guys know there's a legend about a witch who lived in these woods?" Lucas finally returned, breathless and wide-eyed. The group turned to him, curiosity piqued. "They say she used to lure children into the forest and never let them leave," he continued, his voice low and serious. "Some say she still roams these woods, looking for her next victim." The fire crackled ominously as Lucas's words hung in the air. The scouts exchanged nervous glances, the tales of the witch adding a layer of dread to their already tense situation. "Come on, that's just a story," Ethan scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. As the night deepened, the forest seemed to come alive. The shadows grew darker, and the strange noises intensified, echoing through the trees like whispers of the unseen. The scouts huddled closer to the fire, their laughter fading as the reality of their isolation sank in. They were not just camping. They were intruders in a place that held secrets far beyond their understanding. Little did they know, the true terror of the Whispering Pines was just beginning to unfold. As the night wore on, The scouts found it increasingly difficult to sleep. The strange noises and the lingering unease made it impossible to find rest. Finally, as the first hints of dawn began to creep through the trees, Jake suggested they explore the area further. "Maybe we'll find a better campsite," he said, trying to sound optimistic. The group set out, their steps heavy with exhaustion and trepidation. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees growing thicker and the underbrush more tangled. Jamie felt a sense of dread building in the pit of her stomach, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Suddenly, Ethan let out a gasp. "Look!" he exclaimed, pointing ahead. Through the trees, they could see the outline of a structure. A house, or what remained of one. As they drew closer, the sight of it sent chills down their spines. The house was old, its once proud facade now crumbling and decaying. Moss and vines crawled up the weathered walls, as if nature itself was trying to reclaim the building. The windows were dark and empty, like soulless eyes staring back at them. The roof sagged, and the porch steps were broken and uneven. Jamie felt a lump in her throat as they approached the house. The air around it seemed to thicken with an oppressive energy, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. "We shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But the others pressed on, their curiosity overriding their fear. As they stepped onto the creaking porch, the sense of dread intensified. The door hung open, as if inviting them inside. Jamie hesitated, but the others had already crossed the threshold. With a deep breath, she followed, her heart pounding in her ears. The interior of the house was in a state of disrepair. Dust and cobwebs covered every surface, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Shards of broken glass and splintered wood littered the floor, and the once grand staircase leading to the second floor was barely intact. As they explored the rooms, they found remnants of a dark past. Old photographs, their edges curled and faded, hung crookedly on the walls. In one room, they discovered a collection of strange symbols carved into the floorboards, their meaning a mystery. In another, they stumbled upon a hidden room, its door barely visible behind a tattered curtain. The atmosphere in the house was suffocating, and Jamie felt as if the walls were closing in around them. The air seemed to thicken with a sense of foreboding, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The others, too, seemed to sense the change, their laughter fading into uneasy silence. As they made their way back outside, Jamie couldn't help but glance over her shoulder. The house loomed behind them, its dark windows seeming to follow their every move. She shuddered, a chill running down her spine. Whatever secrets this place held, she knew they were better off not knowing. But as they walked away, Jamie couldn't help but wonder if the house would ever truly let them go. The feeling of being watched lingered, and she knew that whatever darkness lurked within those walls had left its mark on them all. As the sun rose over the whispering pines, the scouts awoke with a sense of unease. The strange occurrences of the previous day weighed heavily on their minds, and the discovery of the abandoned house had left them shaken. As they packed up their camp, an uneasy silence hung in the air. Suddenly, a scream pierced the morning stillness. The group whirled around to see Ethan vanish into the bushes, his terrified cries fading into the distance. They rushed to the spot where he had stood, but there was no trace of him, save for a few broken twigs and a single shoe. Panic gripped the remaining scouts as they realized they were not alone in the forest. Jake tried to maintain order, but his voice trembled with fear. "We need to stick together and find a way out of here," he said, his eyes darting nervously between the trees. As they pressed on, more scouts disappeared, one by one. Jamie found herself clinging to Lucas, her skepticism replaced by sheer terror. "What's happening to us?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The forest seemed to close in around them, the shadows deepening and the air growing thick with an oppressive energy. The scouts stumbled through the undergrowth, their once strong bonds fraying under the strain of their fear. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the trees. It was the witch, her pale face twisted into a malevolent grin. The scouts froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The witch raised her gnarled hands, and the forest came alive around them. Branches snapped and twisted, forming a barrier that blocked their path. The ground shook, and the earth opened up, swallowing one of the scouts whole. Jamie and Lucas clung to each other, their terror overwhelming them. In a desperate bid for survival, Jamie and Lucas ran, their lungs burning and their legs aching. They dodged through the trees, the witch's laughter echoing behind them. They stumbled upon a small cave, its entrance partially obscured by vines and moss. Without hesitation, they ducked inside, their hearts racing. The cave was dark and damp, but it offered a temporary respite from the witch's wrath. Jamie and Lucas huddled together, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. As they explored the cave, they discovered an ancient ritual chamber. Strange symbols adorned the walls, and a faint glow emanated from a small alcove. Jamie and Lucas approached cautiously, their curiosity overriding their fear. Inside the alcove, they found a small amulet, its surface etched with the same symbols that covered the walls. Jamie picked it up, feeling a strange energy coursing through her veins. She knew what she had to do. With the amulet in hand, Jamie and Lucas emerged from the cave, their determination fueling their steps. They faced the witch head-on, the amulet glowing with a blinding light. The witch shrieked in agony, her power weakening. Jamie and Lucas ran, the witch's cries fading behind them. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs ached, but they never looked back. They emerged from the forest, their clothes torn and their skin scratched, but they were alive. As they stumbled into the town of Eldridge, the locals looked on in shock. Jamie and Lucas told their story, but few believed them. The witch's curse had been broken, but the scars it left would never fully heal. In the years that followed, Jamie and Lucas tried to move on, but the memories of that fateful day haunted them. They knew that the Whispering Pines would always hold a dark secret, a reminder of the horrors that lurk in the shadows. The sun hung low in the sky as Jamie and Lucas stumbled into Eldridge, their clothes torn and faces pale. The familiar sights of the town felt surreal, as if they had emerged from a nightmare. The warmth of the sun did little to chase away the chill that had settled in their bones. They were back, but they were not the same. As they recounted their harrowing tale to the townsfolk, disbelief washed over the crowd. Faces twisted in skepticism, whispers filled the air. Just a campfire story, some said, while others shook their heads, dismissing their experience as mere imagination. Jamie felt a pang of frustration and sorrow. How could they understand? How could they know the terror that lurked in the Whispering Pines? Days turned into weeks, and life in Eldridge resumed its normal rhythm. But for Jamie and Lucas, the memories of that fateful camping trip lingered like a dark cloud. They tried to move on, to forget the friends they had lost and the horrors they had faced, but the shadows of the forest haunted them. One evening, as Jamie sat alone in her room, she glanced out the window at the tree line beyond the town. The Whispering Pines loomed in the distance, their dark silhouettes a stark reminder of the nightmare she had escaped. Suddenly, a chill swept through her, and she felt an unsettling presence. It was as if the forest was calling to her, beckoning her back. That night, Jamie was plagued by nightmares, visions of the witch, her twisted smile, and the anguished cries of her friends. Each time she awoke, drenched in sweat, she felt a weight pressing down on her chest, suffocating her with dread. Lucas, too, struggled with his own demons, often waking in the middle of the night, convinced he could hear the witch's laughter echoing through the trees. Weeks later, while walking through town, Jamie noticed something strange. A group of children had gathered at the edge of the Whispering Pines, their laughter ringing out like a siren's call. Panic surged through her as she rushed toward them. "Get away from there!" she shouted, her voice laced with urgency. The children turned, their innocent faces puzzled by her fear. But as Jamie approached, she noticed something chilling. One of the children wore an old tattered backpack that looked eerily familiar. It was Ethan's. Her heart raced as she realized the implications. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The children exchanged glances, and one of them shrugged. "We found it in the woods," he said, his tone casual, as if it were just another lost toy. Jamie felt the ground shift beneath her. The witch's curse had not been broken. It had merely been waiting, lying in wait for the next unsuspecting souls to wander into her domain. The forest was alive, and its dark magic still pulsed beneath the surface. As Jamie turned to run, a cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "You can't escape me," it seemed to say, echoing the words of the witch. She glanced back at the children, now standing motionless, their eyes glazed over as if entranced by something unseen. With a heavy heart, Jamie knew that the Whispering Pines would always hold its secrets, and the darkness within would continue to lure the curious and the brave. The scars of that fateful camping trip would never fully heal, and the witch would remain a haunting presence, forever entwined with the lives of those who dared to tread too close to her domain. As she fled the town, the shadows of the forest loomed behind her, a reminder that some curses are never truly broken.